Welcome to Talking Live. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig, and we are talking money, which is actually one of the difficult questions and areas that I personally grapple with. So we are so thrilled to have Nicole Lapin. She is a best-selling author. She has 3 books out there. She also does a podcast, and she is going to help us figure out how to navigate money. In fact, she has a new school out called The Money School, and her website is amazing. Nicole, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Robi. It's so good to see you. Wait, sorry, Dr. Robi.
No, you call me Robi. You know, we had such a good time when I first met you at Inside Edition. We were on what was called a dream team to talk about O.J. Simpson. Do you remember that?
Okay, the only part of that I remember is that we were the dream team, and I totally forgot what we were even talking about. But all I remember was you.
I think you were talking about somehow what companies would be willing to support a reality show that never existed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got less interesting than your pretty face. But you know, and being part of a dream team, I like that I can die a happy woman now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have a picture that I'm going to share with our audience of that actual day. So, and I'll share it with you as well. Money really is a tough topic. I do not know if you've heard of this, but it's certainly true of the people that I know. People would rather walk around naked than show their bank statements.
That's right. That's right. I actually did a social experiment where I asked women in particular in LA. I went out to like Hollywood Boulevard and I said, would you admit your weight or your salary? And more women admitted their weight than their salary. Now, as you know, like as a woman, neither one is like a super fun, comfy, cozy conversation to have. But I did a survey with Nielsen that showed the same thing, that women will talk about way more taboo things before they talk about money. And I think, you know, you've probably been in the same situation at dinner with girlfriends where we'll talk about everything before we talk about money. We'll talk about sexy time. We'll talk about bikini waxes. We'll talk about everything. And then I'll bring up, because I'm that girl who's like, what are you making now? Or, you know, what's in your bank account? And it's totally crickets. It's crickets. I'm like, girl, you just told me about your landing strip. What?
Yeah. Why do you think that is, Nicole? Why do you think people are so sensitive about money?
I think that there's so much shame, and as you know, the biggest enemy is between our ears. So sometimes we suffer more imagination than in reality. And I was super freaked out by the language of money, but then I realized it's a language like anything else. We just don't have a Rosetta Stone for that language growing up. And so once I could speak the language and spoke it to the world, I realized, like, yeah, if you went to China and you didn't speak Chinese, you'd be super confused. You went to Wall Street or you went to talk about money and you didn't speak that language, you'd be really confused. But once you do, it's actually not as complicated as, you know, you make it out to be in your head. We all have this mean girl inside our head who tells us, like, we can't do it, or guys are better than we are at this. Like, that's BS.
I think that there's a lot of self-esteem associated with money. And I certainly noticed that in New York City, either people trying to pretend to be wealthier than they are. And just in terms of language, you talk about this on your website, that we're not really taught about money. And I love how open you are about your own personal journey with money, and everybody should follow you on Instagram, and we'll have a link, because you have great quotes and you're very honest about your start, that really talking about money and becoming a money expert was almost secondary because you were the youngest CNN anchor that they ever had, and you were talking about finances then, but I don't know if you considered yourself an expert.
Yeah, I'm the least likely person to be a money expert or talk about money or be in business for myself. I grew up in an immigrant household, first generation American, like super broken home. My father was brilliant doctor, but also an alcoholic and a drug addict who died when I was really young. And like, I was dealt a terrible hand, like terrible. And I played it the best I could, but honestly, like, the chances of what I was going to make out of my life were pretty low. I probably was destined to become a homeless woman in an alleyway, and not a CNN anchor. And, you know, I just took the opportunities I had and made the most of it. I definitely didn't want to be in finance, like, forget about it. My boyfriend in high school said he wanted to be a hedge fund manager. I thought he wanted to be in gardening. Like, I was so clueless. My family just used cash growing up. Nobody talked to me about the Wall Street Journal or stocks or any of that stuff. Like, you know, and so when I was offered a job, I just needed a job. So I took it, and I lied, and I faked it till I made it. And I was 18. I was offered a job on the floor of the Chicago Merc, and I just faked it till I made it. And then I realized that it's a language that I could speak, and I figured out harder things in life.
I love how you mention that this book is not for finance experts. It's for the girl you used to be, the girl who was broke and didn't really know about money.
Totally. I went on to, you know, be an anchor for CNBC, Bloomberg, talking to a lot of old rich white dudes about money. And I honestly am not editorializing when I say that. Like, the Nielsen ratings show that. You can see that. And I never expected to be that girl, but I always felt like I wanted to talk to my former self, the girl who was smiling and nodding and not joining basic money conversations because she was too freaked out and scared. And, you know, I reached a lot of goals early on in my career that I never thought I would. And at that point I was like, you know what, I want to do something that I'm really proud of. And I think that there is a white space in this market, and there's a void, and there's amazing financial experts and, you know, anchors and journalists and all sorts of stuff. Susie Orman is amazing and has an awesome audience, and Gene Chatsky, and I just felt like there was a white space to grab while I was, you know, talking to the aforementioned old rich white dudes, and a language to, you know, use that wasn't often used when talking about money. And I didn't know at the time, girl, that I was disrupting this finance space. Like, I didn't go into it thinking like, here, we're going to do something great and different, and I'm going to build a brand. Like, I didn't even think I was going to have a first book, much less a second or third or two more on the way. Like, you know, it took me 10 years to even get my first book deal. So I ended up just, writing what my former self wished she had, but didn't. And I guess
I wrote down some quotes that you have on your Instagram, and I love it. A man is not a financial plan. And the reason why I mention that is because many women, even modern women, kind of grew up with that idea.
I mean, I thought that too. Like, I would be lying to you if I didn't think, even as I got my financial life together, I was like, you know what, a guy is going to figure this out, or I'm going to marry a rich guy, it's going to be fine. Like, you know me, I like saying the most taboo things possible. And I think a lot of us are just, you know, ingrained with this idea that, like, a guy is going to figure it out, or a guy is going to take care of it. And it's almost the same way. And again, you'll forget more than I'll ever know about this type of stuff. But I almost think that what porn is to men, rom-coms and Disney movies are to women, where it's like a complete distortion of reality, where, like, sex is obviously not like porn, and men are not princes and not going to save the day and, like, fix all of our financial things. And so, it's up to us to remember that we, in the end of the day, have to have our own backs.
What do you think women want to learn from you? What questions do you hear the most?
You know, I often hear, like, why don't you talk to men? And I think with anything in media in particular, if you try to be all things to all people, you're nothing to anyone. So, you know, I talk to women who, by the way, are super successful and have gotten all sorts of degrees and all sorts of stuff. Like, I don't even know why back when we used to see humans in real life, I would be invited to business schools. I'm like, me? I'm going to business school. You guys are paying $100,000 or more a year, like, to listen to what I have to say. I went to the school of hard knocks. And I think that at all levels, there's this this shame and this fear around finances because it's so loaded with your worth. And it's, nobody wants to look stupid asking a question and stuff like that. So I sort of take it for the team and I'm like, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. I talk in all my books about my salaries at all networks, like how much I made from my advance, because I thought, if somebody's gonna read this, they're like, what did this girl make? And I was like, okay, listen, I will go first for all of the conversations. I definitely have to put my money where my mouth is. If I'm telling other women, and you talk about your salary, more than your weight, then I have to go first, for sure.
I just want to mention the books that you have out there. You have Rich Bitch, Boss Bitch, and your latest, Becoming Superwoman.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about taking care of yourself and your own mental health in order to show up in your life.
Yes. And my last book, the thesis is that self-care is the biggest asset or liability in your career. And when it's off, I think it can bring you to rock bottom like it did for me. I had a complete mental, emotional, physical breakdown that stemmed from burnout and an emergency admittance to the psych ward that made me rethink everything about how I was working. And that hustle mentality that I preached myself for a long time doesn't ultimately work. And so I think I self-prescribed not drugs or alcohol, but work. And that ultimately kicks your butt, as you know. And so I was actually supposed to write a totally different book as a third book, but it was the journey that I was going through. And I knew that if I was breaking down, and I knew that if I was trying to be Superwoman, the character who tries to be it all and do it all and be all things to all people, so ultimately she's nothing to herself, that a lot of other women were going through that too. And that's absolutely what I found. I didn't know that it was going to be as zeitgeisty as it was, but I was like, listen, this is going to affect your career more than everything I've ever told you to date. Like all the negotiating, all the, email writing tips and tricks and all this stuff, like doesn't matter if you're in the emergency room like I was, canceling everything in my, that was on my schedule. Nothing else matters.
Nicole, when people look at you, you're gorgeous, you're so put together. No one would ever imagine that you came from a challenged background. You are very successful. You were valedictorian at a very competitive college. What do you think helped you to be so resilient? That's
such a great question, obviously. I just felt like for me, failure wasn't an option. There wasn't like a couch to go home to. And, I may look really put together on the outside, but for so long, I never felt as put together as I looked. And I thought that, I full self-awareness that I'm no like Kardashian or have this huge following or anything, but I took that whatever platform I had really seriously to say, there have been times where I've been crying in the bathroom before going on the air. Like I've had many rounds in the ring with darkness and depression and part of the PTSD diagnosis that I had, which was not something I ever thought folks who didn't go to war could have, but as you know, is in the DSM. I didn't actually wish that was different. For a long time, I thought, I wish I just had a perfect family, or I wish I just, was happy all the time. And, the reason that I'm talking to you right now, or that we were on awesome shows and talk shows and stuff like that, is because I was exactly who I was. And, for a long time, I thought that was my biggest problem, but I had to reframe that. And that's what I did in my last book as actually my biggest superpower. I reframed my thinking around that. And, I really came to terms with the idea that I may look put together, but on the inside, I think a lot of us aren't as put together as we looked. And somebody has to say that too first. I was like, money is taboo, mental health is taboo, like whatever, I'll just talk about it first.
And we are so happy that you are, because you're going to help a lot of women out there who admire you and know that they don't need to come from perfect or be perfect in order to be successful. And that's a very, very powerful message. you have many schools out there, but you just came out with the Money School. And I love your website, by the way. It's just, you have so much good information and great articles. But the Money School is something new. It's something you recently put together. Tell me a little bit about the inspiration about the school and what people can hope to learn from it.
So forever and ever, I had been on this soapbox that we don't learn this stuff in school. Like, if I were in charge of the world, we wouldn't learn BS stuff like the Pythagorean theorem and geometry and how to dissect a frog, and we would learn how to do our budget and taxes and make a business plan. That would be way more valuable than some of the other stuff that we never use again. And so I just heard myself saying this over and over again. And I was like, well, maybe I should just do something about it. And so I went on a hunt. I wanted to partner potentially with other folks. Like, when I first started my company, I went down the road of doing a 501c3. And then I was like, forget it. Nobody needs another 501c3. And I don't need another vanity project. But I could probably be more impactful helping others. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I could get behind like some finance schools and, you know, help them and get the word out. And I really didn't find anything. And so I then created one. And trust me, I am the least likely person to become a money expert, to talk to any other humans, much less the world about money, much less teach other people or create a school and become a professor with this type of stuff. And so, you know, I tried to make what I wish existed. And that's what the Money School is. It's a master class about getting your financial life together once and for all, with video modules and quizzes and worksheets and a community and all sorts of, you know, tools that I'm definitely not qualified to put together. Like, I'm not a legit.
I think you're qualified. You went to Harvard.
I don't know if anyone's necessarily a total expert in anything, but I tried to, you know, figure out what I would have wanted in a school, and I created that. It's definitely not a conventional school, but it will teach you, you know, how to get through basic personal finance stuff and start investing and thinking for yourself around these topics. Because, by the way, I think, don't listen to me about everything. Don't listen to any expert about anything. Think for yourself. You know, when I became a vegetarian when I was 12, my family ate meat, and I could have thought at that moment, like, I like meat, I'm gonna eat meat, but I didn't. But I think it's that moment where I want everybody to ask themselves, just because it's always been done a certain way doesn't necessarily mean it's the way it needs to be forever. And it's that moment of just thinking for yourself that's so important, that I hope the Money School helps you do.
You know, one of the things I think of from a psychological perspective, sometimes what keeps us stuck is this idea that we have about ourselves that can be very, very limiting. And I really subscribe to a growth mindset, so that we're always growing and learning. And the beauty is that allows us to redefine how we experience ourselves and what we can achieve. And I just think it's so important, because I really do think people have so many issues about money and don't have the language and don't feel comfortable, and you're so relatable. We're going to have a link up so that everyone can find your Money School. But before I let you go, I definitely want to ask you the 5 questions so people can get to know you a little bit better. They're easy questions.
Okay.
Are you willing to play along with me?
Obviously.
Okay, good. Okay. What is something you really resent paying for?
I really resent paying for overdraft fees and stuff like that. Like, it drives me crazy, or late fees for me and for everybody else.
It's a waste, right? Where do you get your news from?
I get my news. I get a lot of it from Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram lately. And I actually find that a lot of my audience gets their news from Instagram. You know this. And so I take it really seriously, that I'm like, oh, hey, I'm not actually giving you a whole bunch of breaking news. I'm not like creating the news that you're not going to find on CNN, but that's sort of the method and the medium that I think a lot of young women are using too.
Yeah, yeah. What are you interested in that most people are not?
Oh gosh. I am totally interested in a lot of investing. Yeah, I love like getting really nerdy and granular in annuities and super fun stuff like retirement. Maybe this is why I'm 36 and single and never.
Well, that's where we part ways. But God bless you. I mean, I think it's fabulous. I would want my son to marry somebody who is knowledgeable and confident about money. Because I think when you're not, it's really hard to feel good about yourself.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's where the growth mindset comes into play too. You know, for a long time, I was like, I can't do this. There's no way. I wasn't dealt a great hand. I wasn't set up for success. Like a guy has to do this. And so, you know, I think it's, reframing that growth mindset in all aspects of your life.
What word is a lot of fun to say for you?
The least favorite word I have is rural because I can never say it. Rural. Okay. Anytime I was on news, I would change that to remote in script.
It.
That's really hard for me to say. I really like, I love words. I think they're just so delicious. I love saying, gosh, what do I love saying lately? Du jour. I love saying omni-channel because it just like, it feels omniscient and multi-channel and multi-platform. I know that that's almost cliche in the business world, but it's one of my go-tos as of late.
Okay, that works for me. And our final question in the quick 5, what habit do you have now that you wish you started much earlier?
Yeah, so definitely investing. The power of compounding interest is what Einstein said was the 8th wonder of the world. He was a pretty smart dude. So I definitely wish that I started putting money away much, much earlier and took into account how taxes and fees would eat into that compounding interest. Because you don't need a lot to start, and you don't even need to add a lot to it to grow and become a millionaire and make your money work for you versus the other way around. We work really hard for our money, so we might as well make it work for us.
And it's really easier to spend money than it is to earn money. And before we go, I just want to ask, what advice are you giving to people right now during the pandemic? Because we know the economy is going into a recession. What is the future going to look like?
Well, I often say that we can't control the global economy and we can't control the markets. We can only control ourselves and our own little economies. And so, you know, I think rethinking what a spending plan looks like right now is really important for this new normal. You know, I would rejigger what I previously suggested as a spending plan by slightly amending it to lower the extras. I break it down to the 3 E's. So essentials, endgame, and extras, where in the past, I would say 70% goes to the essentials, 15% goes to the endgame, 15% goes to the extras. And now I say bring down your basic expenses because there's a ton of relief programs out there. You can always negotiate everything to 65% and then 5% to the extras because we were not even able to buy the latte if we wanted to.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the end game, because it's so important. Now people are like, oh, you were talking about this emergency fund? Yeah, so it's pouring every day. And I didn't want to be right about needing like an emergency fund, but I think I think that's one of the, you know, silver linings of what's going on right now is that people are understanding the importance and the need for having that emergency fund and then replenishing it.
Well, let's find out where people can find you. You want to tell us where everyone can find you? And I just want to mention also your podcast, Hush Money, is also now out so people can continue to hear your fabulous advice.
Yay, thank you. Hush Money is on iHeart. I do it with the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, Jason Pfeiffer. It's called Hush Money. So we talk about the hush topics of money. And you can find me at Nicole Lapin wherever social media is served. And then if you want to challenge yourself during these challenging times, the Money School Challenge is what I just launched as well.
Wonderful. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me. I know we've been like years.
I know.
Happen, and you're a doll. Everybody check out Nicole, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.